Hey, what's up? Welcome to episode 4 of Interview with the Muse. Today's episode is really exciting because I'm going to be talking about epigenetics a little bit. I know that's a big word, and you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with being an artist, being a creative, being somebody that is constantly chasing awe and curiosity and joy and grief and all of the feelings that come with being human? Well, I have a prompt for you. Okay, this is really going to help you get into the nitty gritty of how you are nurturing your child self, your childlike wonder, but then also looking forward to the future, whether you plan to, continue on and have children of your own or adopt or whatever it might be, or if this stays with you, it doesn't matter. It's important for us to think about what is written in the DNA, and what can we change? What can we rewrite? Okay. You might be wondering, whoa, that's a lot. It is a lot. I am kind of a lot of a type of person. My name is Maddie Clifford. I'm a writer, musician, organizer, revolutionary, comedian, a bunch of different things. But most importantly, I am a person who is really inspired by creating community and solidarity in a time when curiosity is contraband, in a time when we are made to feel isolated, in a time when we are dealing with despair, we're dealing with loneliness. And this is the time when we need to really forge bonds, and we need to be thinking about worlds. What worlds do we want to create? Okay. And that is why this community is for you. Okay. I have prompts. Every week I also do a questions from the coven. So if you have any questions that you want to submit, I will answer them anonymously if you'd like me to. Just message me at maddiecliffordcoach@gmail.com, and that is how I will get your questions. So let's go into epigenetics. Epigenetics is a biological term. It's the study of changes in organisms caused by modification of gene expression rather than alteration of genetic code itself. Okay, so it basically shows that environmental factors and behaviors can change how genes are expressed without altering the DNA sequence. What this means in literal sense is I like to use the potato famine that happened in Ireland, which a lot of people just say the way we learn about it is kind of oh, there was this famine and how did it happen? No, the British, they caused this potato famine to occur. Actually, if you read this book called How the Irish Became White, you can actually learn a lot about the history of how Irish people were some of the first people that were racialized by the British Empire. That is another video. But basically, the Irish potato famine had a significant impact on Irish people, on their genetics, in terms of people obviously were going without food for very long periods of time. And so this actually changed some of how genes are expressed in people's descendants. So let's say, you have a tendency to overeat when you feel nervous or you feel anxious. This could possibly, I'm not a scientist, please don't get mad at me, biologists, but I'm trying to just explain this in the broadest sense that I possibly can, although it is a very complex field of study. But essentially what this means is that as a descendant of somebody whose ancestors endured and survived the potato famine, you might have a behavioral thing where you overeat or you hoard food as a way to cope with stress, anxiety, things like that. And this was a behavior response to a very traumatic and horrible thing that occurred that was passed on from generation to generation. Okay, and so what does this have to do with being an artist? Well, I like to think about myself not just as an artist alone in the world, but as an artist who is thinking about what is my ancestral legacy. And this doesn't have to be a biological legacy, because as I've talked about in other videos, sometimes artists have chosen families, just like queer folks, trans folks, oftentimes show us what it means to have chosen family and how sacred and how important chosen family is. You also have queer ancestors. You have trans ancestors, right? You have black ancestors, you have brown ancestors, you have ancestors that you can look back to and see what kind of experiences did they endure. How did they get through things, right? And you can almost think about those ways of navigating as kind of like heirlooms. So an heirloom, what's an heirloom? Let's break it down. So your grandma might have gifted you a necklace or a handkerchief, a scarf, something like tangible that was passed down to you and now it's your inheritance, right? Well, we often inherit different trauma responses. We inherit, emotional ways of being from our foremothers, our forefathers, our forepeople, right? People that came before us. And what are those heirlooms that you might want to keep, and some of them that you might not want to keep? Okay, if you can think about that for a second. And I think I'll start off being really, really vulnerable myself and talk about some of the things that I learned from previous generations. I think particularly, I'll speak on my dad's side. On my dad's side, my dad is from Jamaica. He is from St. Thomas, which is a parish in Jamaica on the eastern side of the island. And it's also really known as a very magical place. My father was born in a house with 5 other children in the country. He's a country person. He became a Rastafarian probably in the late 60s, early 70s. And he was very into politics. He was a Pan-Africanist. And one of the things that I think I didn't really get a lot of time with my father. He passed away when I was 16 years old, but I do remember him having a lot of anger, right? And a lot of that was righteous rage, righteous anger. And in the previous episode, which you should totally watch, which is the very first episode of this podcast, Interview with the Muse, I talk about the story of my name, and I talk about the story of the name Mad and why it has multiple meanings. And I think that ancestrally, this feeling of anger, especially righteous anger, is something that is a bit of an heirloom for me. For a lot of my life, the way that I expressed depression wasn't necessarily in this way where I was sad or I couldn't get out of bed. Sometimes it would come off as having an attitude or being really short with people or closing myself off, sabotaging relationships, right? Just kind of coming off like a stepping razor, very sharp, very mean, fighting, everyone. And, you don't want to be fighting everyone, especially when you already feel alone, when you already feel sad, when you already feel like nobody understands you. And this is the heirloom that I hold, the anger heirloom, the righteous rage, right? And I hold it, and those things are written in my DNA because knowing the history of Jamaica and the brutality of enslavement of Jamaican people, the corporal punishment that Jamaican people experience, particularly Black African Jamaican people, which is over 90% of the population of Jamaica, and how that rage was expressed and how it was, oftentimes there was a lot of rebellions. And that's one of the things Jamaicans learn about their history as a series of rebellions, which is very different from the United States. Although now we learn more of our history about that. So I want you to think about, what is your ancestral artistic legacy? What creative inclinations are written in your blood, in your marrow? What masterpieces are encoded in your DNA? What are the things that you want to bring, and what are the things that you want to leave? So I think when I think about this righteous anger that's living in my blood and in my body, the things that I want to keep is the courage. My dad was a very courageous person, and a lot of the people on my dad's side are very courageous people. Courage, oftentimes we think of it as something that is, you're really strong and you're just kind of this brute force. But courage actually requires vulnerability, intense levels of vulnerability. So it's almost like you're just this big sensitive person out in the world, and you're jumping into the front lines, and you're the one that's saying the truth before everybody else is saying it, which can actually get you a lot more enemies than friends when you're speaking the truth, right? And so that is something that is encoded in my blood that I want to take on and take to the next generation. So that's an heirloom that I want to take. An heirloom that I want to leave or is not going to pass on with me, but I've thought about a lot, is that anger turning inward or turning on other people that I love. I think that oftentimes there's a lot of stereotypes about Caribbeans, specifically Jamaicans. Oftentimes Jamaicans are seen as pretty unruly and harsh as the way that they interact or talk to each other. And oftentimes that really just comes as like, sometimes it's just cultural and just like different ways that we communicate and talk. But sometimes it is genuinely people have misdiagnosed or undiagnosed mental disorders that are coming out in different ways that the Western idea might not understand. So, for my dad especially, like I could tell he definitely dealt with depression. He dealt with a lot of different challenges in his life that were very much due to living in Babylon, obviously, but also oftentimes that caused him to, not show up as the best partner that he possibly could for the women in his life, especially, and for his own children. So that's something that I don't want to pass on to the next generation. I want to be self-aware. I want to use my righteous rage with precision so that it doesn't hurt anybody else. Okay, so hopefully you understand what this prompt is about. What's written in your blood? As every episode, I'm giving you this prompt and you can use it however you want. It might come out as a collage. It might come out as a song. It might come out as a journal entry. It might be something that you just think about for a little while. What is your ancestral artistic legacy? What creative inclinations are written in your blood, in your marrow, in the marrow of your bones? What masterpieces are encoded in your DNA? Okay? I know it's a lot to think about, but this is going to be super helpful for you when it comes to understanding who you are and what your values are. Okay? And I want you to remember, I know this might be a little bit of a challenge, but I want you to have courage. Like I mentioned before, that is the heirloom that I want to pass to you. My beloved person, creative artist person. Courage. Please don't ever lose hope or lose your sense of courage. Courage is not brute force. Courage is having vulnerability to face the things that other people are afraid to face. Okay? And remember, our love for one another is more powerful than all the systems conspiring against us. See you next time.